Welcome to the journey of a lifetime, where every word counts, every verse speaks, and every story unfolds to reveal the timeless wisdom of the ages. I'm your host, Lynn Falconer, and I welcome you to this episode on the Joyful Alchemist podcast. I want to thank you for subscribing, and I ask you to please do share with friends and family. In our episode today, we continue our 365-day journey through the Bible and also continue our reading of the book of Numbers. Now, focus today is on chapters 11 through 30, which encompasses a significant portion of Israel's journey from Mount Sinai to the edge of the Promised Land. Now, these chapters detail various events, laws, and instructions given to the Israelites by God through Moses. What we're going to do is we're going to take a summary of the key points of each of those chapters, and then we'll take a look in a more detailed view of the teachings and the principles that can potentially be applied to modern life. So here's a summary of the key points. When we look at chapter 11, our summary would be that the Israelites complain about their hardships in the wilderness, and God sends quail and manna to provide for them. In this chapter, Moses also appoints 70 elders to assist him in leading the people. Then we go to chapter 12. In this chapter, we find Miriam and Aaron criticize Moses for marrying a Cushite woman, and Miriam is punished with leprosy. Moses intercedes for her, and she is healed. And then we go to chapter 13 and 14. 12 spies are sent to explore the land of Canaan. 10 of them bring back a negative report, causing the people to rebel against God. As a result, they are condemned to wander in the wilderness for 40 years until the entire generation dies off, except for Caleb and Joshua. And then in chapter 15, God gives laws concerning sacrifices, offerings, and unintentional sins. In chapter 16, Korah, Dathan, and Abiram rebel against Moses and Aaron's leadership, and God punishes them by causing the earth to swallow them up. And then we go to chapter 17, and here God confirms Aaron's priesthood through a miraculous sign. And I encourage you to go read chapter 17, and if you have not done so already, and see what that miraculous sign is. In chapter 18, further instructions are given to the Levites regarding their duties and their privileges. In chapter 19, the law of purification through the ashes of a red heifer is established. And then we go to chapter 20 and 21. Here Moses strikes the rock to bring forth water, but Moses is forbidden from entering the promised land because of his disobedience. The Israelites face opposition from various nations, but they emerge victorious. And in chapters 22 through 24, we read the story of Balaam. Balaam, a prophet hired by the Moabite king Balak, is commanded to curse Israel, and that story unfolds according to that. But Balaam blesses Israel instead, as he finds that God's protection is upon them. And then in chapters 25 through 30, Israel is seduced into idolatry and sexual immorality with the Moabite women, and this results in a plague. Phinehas takes decisive action to stop the idolatry, and his zeal is rewarded. Further laws are given concerning vows, inheritance, and the appointment of Joshua as Moses' successor. So we can see by reading chapters 11 through 30 of the book of Numbers that the book of Numbers contains numerous teachings and principles that can be applied to modern life. So let's take a look at what some of those may be. And this is my opinion on it. I would encourage you to leave some comments and questions as to what you would consider the teachings would be that God has brought us through the teaching that is shared in the book of Numbers. So the first one would be to trust in God's provision. Now, if we look at it, despite the Israelites' constant complaints, God remained faithful in providing for their needs. He sent them the quail and the manna. In today's world, where uncertainties abound, we can learn to trust in God's provision and have faith that He will meet our needs even in difficult times. We can also look at it from a perspective of leadership and humility. If we look at the challenges faced by Moses, he, in his leading of the Israelites, it highlights the importance of humility and reliance on God for leadership. Modern leaders can learn from Moses' example by seeking wisdom, being open to feedback, and trusting in God's guidance. And then, what about the consequences of disobedience? The severe consequences faced by the Israelites for their disobedience serve as a warning for us today. We must heed God's commands and live in obedience to avoid the negative consequences of sin. Intercession and forgiveness is another aspect of the teachings and the principles that we read about in the book of Numbers. So Moses' intercession for Miriam demonstrates the power of prayer and forgiveness. In our relationships, in our personal relationships, one-on-one with our family and friends and our close-knit environment, Moses' intercession for Miriam demonstrates the power of prayer and forgiveness. In our relationships and communities, so our relationships with one another, with our close family and friends, and our immediate circle of influence, as well as in our local and our larger communities, we need to be quick to intercede for others and extend forgiveness, as it fosters reconciliation and healing. And I think from my perspective, it's always important to remember that forgiving another for a hurt or a harm that they have done to you does not mean that you condone their actions, but you are forgiving them and allowing God to take care of the situation. And then what about faithfulness and perseverance? If we read about the examples of Caleb and Joshua, who remained faithful to God despite the doubts and rebellion of the others, we can find inspiration, and it inspires us to persevere in our faith journey. In the face of adversity and opposition, we should remain steadfast in our commitment to God and His promises. And then holiness and purity. The laws of purification and holiness remind us of the importance of living a life that is set apart for God. In a world that often glorifies impurity and sin, especially if we look at our world today, we are called to pursue holiness and purity in our thoughts, our words, and our actions. And then we go to God's sovereignty and protection. When we look at the story of Balaam, that illustrates God's sovereignty over all nations and His protection of His people. In times of uncertainty and turmoil, we can take comfort in the knowledge that God is in control and will ultimately deliver His people from harm. So in conclusion, the book of Numbers, with chapters 11 through 30, offers us a rich tapestry of teachings and lessons that remain relevant and applicable to modern life. And I find that often, as I'm reading the Bible and teachings, that we can find some application where that teaching from those ancient times still apply today. By studying these passages and applying their timeless principles, we can grow in our faith, deepen our relationship with God, and live lives that honor Him in all that we do. Thank you for joining us on this journey through the book of Numbers and our journey through the 365-day reading of the Bible. Be sure to tune in next time as we explore another chapter of the scripture together. And until then, may you find wisdom and strength in the teachings of old. Thank you for listening to this episode on the Joyful Alchemist podcast. I welcome your participation with your comments and questions, and also a reminder that audio episodes are accompanied by posts for your reading pleasure. May God bless your days abundantly. Until next time, this is Lynn Falconer signing off.